All right, I'm joined now by Ash Panjwani, who is head of talent development at Procore. Ash, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Andy. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. We had a great chat a few weeks back, and I was so impressed with all the work you've been doing at Procore as well as in previous companies, and just seem to have such a wonderful philosophy on learning and development. And also, it seemed like in a unique position where you've got support from a company and leaders who are really, I think, supportive of supporting. I said support like four times, who are really supportive of learning and development for employees. And so I'm excited to dig into that, and especially your philosophy on leadership development and the work that you've done there. But before we get to that, I'm always curious, how did you get into learning and development in the first place?
Yeah, my story is a little bit odd. I was one of those rare breeds that kind of knew this is what I wanted to do when I was like 16 or 17 years old. I was taking an AP Psych course, and at the time, my dad was a small business owner and my mom was a marketing executive. So daily, I would hear about all the people related conversations, the interactions, the impact of managers, the impact of colleagues. And so I was just like very fascinated by like that dynamic. Also was really fascinated by just like business operations in general. I was too young to know anything about what business actually meant.
Yeah.
But I knew I liked what I was seeing. And I go into my AP Psych course, and the professor starts talking about IO psychology. And I was blown away. There was a study for workplace behavior. I was like, okay, this is my calling. This is it. This is what I'm going to do. So every decision thereafter kind of led me to where I am today. I'm one of those, like, I'm just itching for my second life now because I feel like I knew my first life so early in my career.
Yeah.
So yeah, really, really early on, I knew that this is what I wanted to do.
That's amazing. And I want to talk about how you got started with the work you're doing there at Procore, but could you share a little bit more about your background and some of the different types of work you've done in learning and development over the years?
Yeah, it actually started off with this like weird gig that I got as a recruiting coordinator for a company called Connexa back in the day.
Hmm.
And it was to get closer to the IO psychologist, really. I didn't know what the job of a recruiting coordinator meant. It was fresh out of college. But I knew that I wanted to know what these organizational psychologists were doing. So I got that gig. I got closer to them. I started to learn about this world of assessments and talent development and learning and development. And so then I went off to get my graduate degree, did some consulting gigs. But then my first gig internally was at a company called VMware. And VMware at the time was, I mean, it was like 20,000 plus employees. And for some reason, they thought, yeah, let's give Ash this job of an HR business partner, which I had no idea what it meant. But I was like, okay, first job out of grad school, let's do it. And I just got very lucky with some mentors and leaders who wanted to guide me and shape me. And so they created some really interesting pathways for me. So I started working with a client group, then went off and actually did a gig with the HR call center to literally pick up the phone with employees who are dealing with like benefits issues, leaves
Hmm.
issues, can't put my time off in workday, things of that sort. And then did a stint in talent development. And the moment I got to talent development, I was doing some short projects on like digital mentor matching tools at the time. It was like building a microsite for managers. And I kind of just didn't want to leave. And so I begged my leaders and my mentors, like, please don't move me. I don't want to go to compensation. I don't want to go to talent acquisition. Just keep me here. Let me do this. And then I started picking up all sorts of oddball projects. The biggest ones, the ones that really like jump started my talent development career was actually in designing global onboarding. It was the main project at VMware. I also did some like talent management related activities, so performance, talent planning, leadership development programs as well. And then Twilio kind of accelerated that path. So continued building a global onboarding program there, then started to widen my network into the manager development world. Funny enough, my graduate thesis was also about like the impact that managers have on employees. So it was always a thing that was in the back of my mind. And then once I got the opportunity, it was kind of there was no stopping me.
Hmm.
Did that at Twilio, and then went to a smaller company called OneTrust. Kind of was all encompassing talent management there, building performance systems, talent systems, as well as manager development programs and engagement surveys, like one stop shop.
Yeah.
And then Procore came calling, and it's kind of been great ever since, building out
Yeah.
onboarding, employee development, manager enablement, leadership development,
Mm.
and a really cool coaching arm. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Right. And you started there a little less than a year ago, I believe. And
Hmm.
as we said, I think you got a lot of support from the leadership team to build out these things you mentioned, talent development, leadership development, all that. How did you, where did you start with, and how do you assess and figure out, okay, where do we need to be investing and where do we want to build first?
Yeah, this was a rare occasion where I'm not having to pull dollars out of my senior leadership. The value was already there. This was a company that had been around for many, many years. They'd had seasons of talent development come in and out, but what was very clear was our value in learning and education, because we had an external facing education arm. How we teach construction to the customers was already very much robust and built out. We had a great onboarding program. I call it political capital, the capital that we earn and spend inside of an organization. That was already earned for me. So I was
Mm.
very, very fortunate. But when I came in, what was clear was, look, one, there was no basic manager development program, not one to say, hey, this is the jobs to be done for a people manager, and then this is like the thing to, this is how to do it well, how to do it effectively.
Yeah.
The other thing that was very clear and missing was the VP population was still learning how to translate that company strategy down to their organization, and then imagine the director level in the middle,
Mhm.
still basically operating as frontline managers and strategic leaders, and they had to do both, and they don't have the right tools and resources in order to be able to do both. So the way that we approached it was, one, we defined what is it that like leaders actually need to do at a company like Procore.
Mm.
What is the playbook? What is the expectation of leaders here? Once we defined that, it became very clear what we needed to do to drive that accountability and then build that system moving forward.
Mm. And so when you look at building out a leadership development program, and almost everybody I talk to in talent development across every company and industry is investing in building or refreshing or rebuilding leadership development programs or looking at building them at
Yeah.
different levels. How did you assess what needed to be done? What leadership needs to look like? I remember we talked before, there was even a manager index you put together or some assessments, right, to figure out, okay, what does great leadership look like? And then how do you figure out what you need to build out to create great leadership development in your organization?
It starts with those conversations with your senior most leaders, right? Like take your C-suite, take the level below the VP population. What does good management look like to them? What does Procore need from our managers today, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? What's really going to help us scale from being a today company to being a forever
Mm.
company? And then once you start to have those many interviews, which is like approximately 60 to 70 is what I would say, after you have those conversations, those trend lines will become so clear. And it looks different by organization, but I think like more or less it boils down to some of the same recurring buckets that at least I've seen over my career. It's really, how do you build great teams? So how do you hire, onboard, build really established, psychologically safe and high in trust teams? And then two, how do you set clear direction? How do you ensure that everyone's rowing in the same direction, aligned to the company strategy? And then how do you build this culture of high performance? How do you give them how do you proactively give them coaching and feedback along the way? And the fourth is really like, how do you model, like role model to the utmost degree the values of the organization? Once you establish those leadership principles, those leadership expectations, then it's really about driving that accountability. So, are we hiring against these expectations? When we're having interviews with people management roles, for people management roles, are we asking them questions related to the expectations that we've already defined internally? are managers getting bottoms up feedback through that manager index that you just talked about? We have an biannual engagement survey, and we have a set of questions that are very directly tied to our set of leadership principles so that we can actively measure whether or not teams and managers are actually personifying those expectations. And then how do you give them tops down feedback during performance? Do they know whether or not they're showing up as the manager that's expected at Procore regularly? And then once you identify those gaps or those inconsistencies in capability, then you can go off to build a system of development. And then for us, it's really we need to make sure that one, every manager knows what those leadership principles are. We need to make sure that they know how to have candid conversations across the board. We need to ensure that they know how to drive accountability for themselves, and then they know how to meet those results. So all of our systems are in accordance with that. All of our development is in accordance with that.
Yeah, it's really interesting, all the elements that you need to think about in putting this together. And I'm curious, what patterns have you observed across your career in scaling leadership development? Because it's one thing to assess, like, okay, this is what we need, this is what we think would be great for leadership. But now we've got X number of leaders in the organization. We want to scale this out so that all leaders are aligned with the same values and the same strategy and all of that.
I think what's very consistent over my career is knowing what kind of population needs what kind of development. So we know that a frontline manager actually yes, they need some frameworks to orient themselves to. What is like the coaching framework that one uses in their company? What is the feedback framework? But then really it's about learning from others, right? It's learning from other people managers who are going through similar situations in the environment that you two belong to. So creating workshops where it's less content, but a lot more immersive, a lot more experiential, where people are spending more time in breakout rooms and learning from each other. For that director population, they already do not have time for workshops. I'm not going to force them to go into something that they don't have time for and that they're just going to kick and scream at. But what I can offer them is that coach, is the extension of what may have been their manager's role, but their manager might be a VP who is probably too busy leading up the entire organization.
Mm.
And so that coach can really be the big unlock for them, how to manage their teams effectively, how to drive strategic leadership at the top. And then for the VP population, it's really all about alignment. How do you create environments for them to align on the work to be done? How to identify those dependencies across the enterprise, not just within their own vertical. And so how do you build that lateral agility amongst that group? That's really what shapes up the entire system.
It's interesting to hear you say that managers, frontline, middle managers need more of that workshop, cohort-based approach to be sitting together, learning in a live setting, talking to each other, learning from each other. But that director level, and this may vary by organization and industry, may not have as much time for workshops and could benefit more from investing in one-on-one coaching with them, which I'd imagine you provide at the VP level as well. And I remember speaking with you before, you said that at Procore, you do provide coaching at scale to quite a few leaders, right? Working with a couple different providers.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. And it's because that manager population is actually so hungry and so eager, right? And they're not getting pulled into planning meetings yet. They're really just leading the work, leading the team. And then that director level really starts to lead the broader organization at this point, not quite the enterprise, but the broader organization. And the VP is leading the enterprise. And so the capacity just lessens over time when in instances where we have offered coaching to directors, it has been a really great unlock.
Hmm.
Having someone to be a thought partner, to be able to translate your team's work back to your organizational strategy, back to the company strategy. That's been so helpful just to have a thought partner and someone to go through the exercise of it all. That's what the managers actually, I've also been in a situation where we've given a coach to every people manager.
Hmm.
And that actually hasn't shown the ROI that we needed because it's the managers actually in kind of the fire immediately, right?
Hmm.
Like they need to go have that conversation in the next 30 minutes. And so picking up the phone with a coach is actually, it takes too long. So
Hmm.
something like an AI coach for a manager, I'm very bullish on.
Hmm.
When a manager can go into the AI coaching tool minutes before their meeting and say, hey, I'm meeting with so and so. These are the topics that I want to cover. How should I go about it? Any feedback that you have for me as I'm going into this, knowing what you know about me, I think that's incredibly helpful and incredibly impactful.
Looking at that manager level where you're creating more workshops and maybe taking them on more journeys, what does that look like? What are some of the essential things that you think managers at that level need to learn or need to practice? And what are you seeing are the biggest challenges there?
Yeah, and it's interesting because managers will be like, oh, yeah, I went to that workshop one time 10 years ago. I think I
Mhm.
know what I need. But actually building skills around alignment and accountability, it's like going to the gym. You don't go to the gym one time and build all the muscle that you need to. You need to train those muscles over time. And so alignment and accountability are actually the two topics that kind of come up over and over again. And it's all about coaching and feedback and setting that clear direction. Creating moments for them to just practice those conversations before they're thrown out into the field to do it themselves, right? It's all about showing them what good looks like, letting them try, and then letting them go out into letting them try in a safe space, and then letting them go out into the field and trying with their actual team. And then coming back and making those little fixes along the way, practicing what worked, what didn't work, fixing that orientation, and then going back. So it's not just a one and done event, but it's really at the course of over the course of months where you create those practice sessions for managers to continue to build this muscle, to build this skill.
Hmm. So, what are some of the key skills that you want to build into that? Is it mostly the basics that we know, like coaching and feedback and difficult conversations? Are there other elements that you found have been really beneficial for them to dive into?
Coaching, feedback, difficult conversations, goal setting to some degree, depending on the model that you're wanting to utilize. Building psychologically safe and high trust teams is a really big one. Building engaged and motivated teams. But those are the kind of the recurring topics that I'm starting to see over the course of my career, not just at Procore, but just other companies that I've been at.
Yeah.
Those are the topics that managers tend to gravitate towards the most as well. The other one that, it's always like the financial acumen that comes about. I
Mm.
need to know more about how to translate the business strategy down to my teams.
Yep.
And for that, as much context as you can provide about the business in which you are operating is actually the best. I don't think there's like a single training that can solve for this, but it's ensuring that we're actually giving managers and leaders all the tools and resources they need in order to be able to effectively cascade and communicate that strategy down, which is the great unlock.
Awesome. And what are you seeing if we move up to that VP level where you talk about bringing people together again, but I imagine have different needs that you need to develop? What are the needs there
Very
and
different.
what are you addressing?
Yeah, and it looks very different company over company. I've worked at companies where it's very heavy development focus. We're talking about leading enterprises. We're talking about unlocking certain cultural behaviors across the company. At Procore in particular, it's all about aligning on the vision and the mission and the work to be done. So
Hmm.
every time we gather, it's all about how are we going to become that forever company? How do we ensure that we're providing access to the right information at the right time, over communicating in instances? And how do we create that rich two-way dialogue between the VP population and the C-suite?
Hmm.
How do they communicate in a way that doesn't feel like it's after every QBR or after every like evaluation instance, but rather an ongoing dialogue so that they're in lockstep about the strategy so that the communication flow is happening up and down and across all the time.
One thing I always like to ask anybody who's building out these programs, and I know it varies a lot by company, but as you're putting these together, whether it's the manager level workshops or VP level, do you favor more in person or virtual? And I believe at Procore, most of this is built in-house, right? Or are you working with any partners on any aspects of the program?
Yeah, it kind of depends on what we're trying to solve for. Procore does have a bias towards internal facilitator, so a lot of the stuff is built internally. With managers, it's been primarily virtual. With the VP population, it's been primarily in person.
Hmm.
There are instances where we'll opt for virtual as well, but they meet biannually over the course of 2.5 days, discussing strategy, discussing ways of working better together, building that lateral agility, building those connections. Because at that level, it really is about who you know and about who you can influence. At the manager population, I think COVID has been a really great blessing. We've kind of all learned how to operate within the Zoom environment and how to best utilize our technology to create a in-person like experience virtually. So I think for the people manager population, we'll probably continue to leverage technology. But at the end of the day, I think where the industry is moving is not towards moving everything to in person, but rather identifying the moments that really matter and creating those moments of connection. For onboarding, that could mean maybe not in person orientation, but maybe a gathering at like the 90-day mark to get exposure to leaders in certain sites. For manager training, it could mean taking some manager trainings on the road. It could mean doing a road show and bringing teams together as a team building activity. All of that's kind of evolving as we speak, but that's kind of how I think about the different structures.
Yeah. As you've built these things in different organizations, and especially as you've built things up at Procore over the last year, what are some of the lessons you've learned over that time?
Communicate as often as you can, over communicate. Tell your HRBPs about it, tell your peers about it, tell your VPs about it, tell your C-suite about it over and over again. People forget. There's a lot going on across the business. I think it would be unfair for us to put that pressure on to our leaders for them to know
Mm.
exactly what's happening in our world. So over communicate, put it within business context, turn it into less of a nice to have activity, but more of a need to have because you've already included them in that process, that earlier process of defining the expectations. You've
Mm.
already pulled from them what we need in order to succeed as a business. Now they're invested. So keep them updated along the way, ensure that their understanding is up to date, and use them as champions. And the other lesson is actually limit the use of your chief people's voice when communicating people programs. I think it can sound a bit redundant. It can sound a bit tired.
Mm.
Leverage leaders who are sponsors of certain programs. Leverage your technology leader. Leverage your product leader
Mm.
instead of just your chief people.
It's not just coming from HR or talent development, but it's
It's
actually
not
coming
just coming from HR.
supported by other parts of the business, and so people see that clearly. And
Oh yeah,
that's
and their
that's a
voices
great one.
carry much further.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you know, they're supporting it. And so it's more important for us to go to these programs. It's not just being pushed out from HR or learning and development, whatever it
Exactly.
may be. Everyone is on board. I'm curious how you've thought about measuring the impact of these investments in these programs.
Yeah, there's a couple of ways to do it. One, we've installed it through ways of assessment, right? Hiring assessments. So we know over time we can start to measure the quality of hire. We can start to measure the effectiveness against the engagement survey because we have a manager index that's repeatedly measuring against whether or not someone is living out the expectations, how frequently those managers are getting promoted into even more senior roles because of the performance structure that we've defined. It's also the retention of the manager population. There's questions regarding does someone have the right support and resources they need in order to excel in their role? That's going to be a part of your engagement survey. That's going to be a really important index. Your general attrition rate, and actually the most important indicator of good engagement across the company is actually going to be trust and confidence in your senior leadership. If that number is looking good, then that tells you that the work that you're doing to develop your leadership is actually
Yeah.
working. That's going to drive overall engagement.
Very interesting. I hadn't thought about that metric. Okay, Ash, we've talked a lot about leadership development. I'm also very passionate about career development, and I'm curious
Right.
about the approach to helping people develop in their careers, where you've been at Procore and maybe in the work you've done in the past. And I remember when we talked before, there's also been an emphasis on creating more talent mobility, which is becoming more popular as well. So I wonder if you could talk about what you're doing there.
Yeah, we're definitely in our infancy at Procore. We've seen seasons of that before, but as of late, we haven't established a new way of working yet. We are exploring development programs this year. I think the biggest, most high impact activity that we could do in the development space is to just have the conversation.
Hmm.
Ensure that managers know how to have that career development conversation and ensure that employees know what to bring to that conversation to make it fruitful. And then you can get very creative about creating unique pathways, internal mobility programs, shadowing programs, rotational programs uh, to create that marketplace inside. But we're definitely at the infancy there.
Yeah. And are you starting to think through what, a lot of companies are working on, uh, defining what roles look like? Is it about creating more mobility so those are a little more fluid, or getting really specific about what certain um, job trajectories look like? I know it's still early days, like you said, but I'm always curious how companies are thinking about making sure that career development is as helpful as it can be for people.
Yeah, we have a history of having career ladders for every role there is across the company. I think, though, it's becoming less and less helpful because what's not clear are the skills that you need to obtain to move from one level to another, to move from one role to another side of the role in another part of the organization. So, how do we build a stronger skills taxonomy is going to be really important this year. The other piece is also without relying too heavily on this upward movement or even like diagonal movement, how do we create room for experiences? How do we learn through our experiences more than taking on formal roles? So when I talk about rotational programs, that's really what I mean. How do we give exposure to certain individuals? Maybe someone who's in a product role right now, but looking to be an engineer or vice versa. Um, letting them shadow and experience what that role looks like before officially making that pivot. I think those are like the really cool unlocks that we can help design and orchestrate for the company.
Yeah, I think that's so so important. And maybe the last thing I wanted to ask you, somebody's curious about this as well, is how do you think about weaving elements of DEI into this to make sure that the learning program, especially leadership development, is as inclusive as it can be?
Yeah, I will tell you, we were in a position, I think it was about a year ago, where DIB learning sat very separate from talent development. That is no longer the case today. It's woven into the fabric of everything that we do. Equity and fairness is the groundwork that we lay first, and then everything else is up top. Rather than calling out specific DEIB programs, like I said, it's just we just talk about fairness for all, equity for all. How do you create safe spaces? How do you create high trust environments? That's the focus of the conversation.
I like that. And so it's weaving it into everything that you're doing, making things safer
Mhm.
and more trustworthy and equitable. And then I would imagine ensuring that all those programs you're creating, especially the leadership development programs, are inclusive of everyone. They're not just for specific people.
Yeah, and it's a responsibility for all of us, right? It's not DEIB team's responsibility to ensure they're embedding in inclusive practices in everything that we do. I think we should all take it upon ourselves to design accordingly, design with those practices and principles in mind.
Yeah. Well, I know it's only been less than a year since you started there, but it seems like you've accomplished a lot since you've been there, Ash, with your team. Is there anything we missed or anything that you are especially proud of that is worth mentioning?
I'm just especially proud of my team, honestly. I think there's a lot that we did do over the last year, and none of it would have been possible without the team that I had. So just grateful for this opportunity. I'm excited to build ahead, excited to build more. That's kind of who I am as a person. So yeah, looking forward to the year ahead.
I love it. Ash, for anybody listening that may want to get in touch with you to ask more questions about the programs you've built, if they're creating programs in their organizations, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Oh, please, yes. Find me on LinkedIn, shoot me a message. I promise I will get back. I'm excited to build my network further as well.
I like it. I like it. Yeah. Make sure you go connect with Ash and connect with me on LinkedIn. Let us know what you thought about it. Ash this has been fantastic. Hang on because we got our bonus Q&A episode that we'll be publishing just 2 days after this one. But thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it and look forward to talking with you more soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. That was awesome. So good. So prepared.
That was good. That was
Oh,
very, yeah, just very comfortable. I think you did a really good job of facilitating and like just driving the conversation.
well, good. Thank you so much. I've been
Yeah, those were good
facilitating
questions.
conversations from and workshops for more than 10 years and podcasting for 7. So I should know what I'm doing from by now, I think.
Well, is it only 7 years? I remember I was building at Twilio and I started listening to your podcast at that time. So
Really?
this must have been like 2019,
Oh, wow. Yeah,
2018
I
maybe?
started this podcast in 2018, June 2018, and I didn't know if anybody would, come on and talk about the stuff they're doing inside companies. And I still remember a woman named Amy, who's was at a different company. Now she runs talent at Mercedes-Benz USA, was like the first person. I was like, yeah, I'll come on. And I just interviewed her again recently. It's kind of fun and just kind of kept growing from there, which has been pretty
Yeah,
cool.
and it's always so helpful because I was like a program manager at the time and
Yeah.
still trying to figure out how to build, how to influence, how to
Yeah.
think about broader scale.
Yeah.
And I remember I would lean on your podcast so much
Oh,
because they were always from people who had done this before. So I was
yeah.
always growing. And I remember telling my manager at the time about it. And I was like, have you listened to Andy's podcast? Like, I'm learning so much. And so I actually introduced it to him because he hadn't heard of it at the time. And this was like December of 2018, I think.
Yeah.
So it would have been very new at the time.
Right.
But yeah,
Already
yeah, I
then.
remember it so clearly.
That's so cool. Well, thank you so much. Who was your manager at
Yeah.
Twilio? I knew a couple people there. I can't remember who.
Andrew Wilhelms.
Oh gosh. The name seems familiar, but I don't know if I knew Andrew Will. Andrew
Yeah.
Willems. I don't know.
Yeah, he was Tesla before that, McKesson before that.
Interesting. Yeah, we might be connected, but
Yeah.
I don't know if we've talked. Okay, let's do the bonus Q&A because I know you're prepared for it. So
Cool.
I don't want to waste that
Well,
preparation. So here we go. Three, two, one. Welcome back to the Talent Development Hot Seat podcast. I'm your host, Andy Storch, and I'm excited that you're joining me today for another great episode and conversation to help you up your game and improve your capabilities in the world of talent development. And today is our bonus Q&A with Ash Panjwani, who runs talent development at Procore. And if you didn't yet listen to our last conversation, make sure you go back and check that out. I talked with Ash all about the lessons she's learned about talent development, especially leadership development over the years. And she shared a lot about how they've set up the leadership development programs at Procore from the manager level to the director level, all the way up to the vice president level, and how those are different from level to level and the elements that go into those, and how she ensures that those are successful and measures the impact of those programs. So if you didn't listen, make sure you go back and check that out. Today is our bonus Q&A round. And Ash, you have worked at a few different places in your career in talent development. I'm curious, you think back across your career, what's been one of your biggest accomplishments or proudest moments so far?
thanks for the question. Thanks for having me back. One moment that really stands out in my mind is actually I was at VMware, and like I mentioned, it was kind of my first stint in talent development. I hadn't really facilitated anything before, and my manager at the time was like, "Oh, Ash, you're going to go off and build this global onboarding program." So I was
Mm.
thinking, great, I get to build, I get to do all the back end work. I didn't know that included facilitating and getting in front of a room of 150 or 200 folks at the
Yeah.
VMware HQ. And I remember having this like gutted feeling for months leading up to it, just not ready to
Mm.
facilitate. This was going to be my first gig. But after I did it, I just knew I couldn't get off stage again. So that was my greatest accomplishment, being able to get up there and then never getting off again.
Yeah, I love it. It's hard to get you on stage and then hard to get you off once you realize like, oh,
Exactly,
this is
exactly.
awesome. I want to do more of this. That's so cool. On the flip side, Ash, I know we've all made plenty of mistakes in our careers. What's been one of your biggest failures or mistakes, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, when early on in my talent development career, I thought Ash gets to build what Ash wants to build. And that was the silliest thing that I could have thought at the time.
Huh.
It wasn't until I actually went and did an HRBP stint to understand how our programs are actually received in the business and why certain programs didn't get the adoption that I really wanted. So really starting to understand less from an L&D mindset, but more from a business leader mindset. What is it that they need in order to scale and meet their numbers, their business needs? And then how do I become an extension of that? Learned very early on that leadership development really starts with buy-in from critical stakeholders, and that's HRBPs, that's your senior leadership, and then that's also business leaders who will continue to advocate for you.
Yeah. Thinking about talent development more broadly, what would you say is one of the biggest challenges in talent development today?
It's this creating highly personalized experiences that kind of solves for all while still scaling for the future. How do we start to design more for something that lasts, something that's built to last versus solving for the here and now? And then how do we better leverage the technology that's out there? I know AI has been a buzz for a little over a year and a half now, but how do we actually start to integrate AI in leadership development, in our talent development practices to help us scale faster, to help establish some foundation, some architecture that's going to last?
Yeah, I agree with that. There's some major challenges there and stuff we need to continue to figure out. And you mentioned AI. Are there any other trends that you're following or excited about in talent development right now?
Yeah, and actually, it is in the AI space. We've been demoing some products that are like AI coaches for managers, and some technology that I'm really blown away by and really bullish over is having an AI bot in your one-on-one meeting with your direct report, capturing all the notes from that conversation, and then immediately giving you feedback as a manager right after that one-on-one. Hey, you took up 60% of the airtime in that one-on-one, and don't forget that meeting is actually not yours, it's your directs. It's your
Mm,
employees meeting.
yeah.
Or you haven't talked about career development in a minute. Shouldn't you readdress that?
Yeah.
Have you set clear goals? Because I haven't heard that recently.
Yeah.
Being able to be that extension, that like mirror and identify your blind spots, I think that's mind-blowing technology.
I love that. It's a good use of AI. I have been, as many people know, following me since I moved to Spain. I've been making a bigger push to learn Spanish, and I've been using lately a platform called I don't know if they call it Preply or Preply, how you pronounce it, but it matches you with one-on-one tutors, language tutors. So I've been taking virtual classes with these tutors online, and at the end of every session, a notification pops up and tells you what percentage of the time you've been speaking versus your tutor. And ideally, if you're learning a language, you want to practice a lot. So you want to be speaking way more than 50% of the time. And if you're not,
Yeah.
that's a problem. So they're big on that as well. And I love seeing that because I'm like, oh, I need to make sure I'm speaking more. Even though I'm afraid to, I need to practice and make mistakes so that I can learn faster.
That's so helpful. And it democratizes data, right? Like
Yeah.
everyone gets access to all the things all at once.
Right. Um, I know you're a lifelong learner like me and someone else, so many other people in our community. Has there been a book or a TED Talk that has made a big impact for you or you often recommend?
I'm rereading the Netflix culture book right now, really deep into that. I care so much about building high performance cultures. And so trying to dust that off and bring it back. And then the other one that I'm just will always kind of be on my screen is the talent strategy group and all of the great articles that comes from Mark Efron and team. I think those are so incredibly helpful, along with my one page talent management, which is also a regular on my desk.
I love that. Mark Efron, who's been a past guest on this podcast. It might have been back in 2019 or something like that, because I remember I was in New York and I interviewed him in person. One of the rare ones I did in person over the years. So really cool to hear that. Is there a tool or a platform or a resource that you really like that helps you do your job better or easier?
Definitely the TSG articles and the frameworks that come out of it. So often, me and my colleagues will reference anything new that's coming out of that TSG, as in the talent strategy
Okay.
group. Any new frameworks that are coming out of that. There's just so much rich stuff in there on how to build a talent strategy, how to build an integrated strategy that aligns both talent management and talent development. Great resource and tool.
Love that. And last question for you, Ash. You've achieved a lot in your career, becoming head of talent development for a great company. And I'm curious for those out there in talent development who are looking for more ways to achieve success in their own careers, what's one more piece of advice you would give?
Get to know the business.
Mm,
Get to know the language, the people, meet with the business leaders as much as you meet with your people stakeholders. I was very lucky enough to get the kick out of talent development into the HR business partner world. My manager then was very supportive of me exploring what the business looked like. My mentors were very open to welcoming me into the HR business partner world. That was the greatest gift that I got. I do my job very differently now, having had that experience. I was very quick to come back into TD because I do love the space and I do like to build and design.
yeah.
But that was an experience I'm never going to forget. And those business leaders are continue to be mentors to me
Mm.
and continue to be advisors in what I build. So yeah, definitely get to know the business a little bit better.
I love that. So important. And so often talent professionals don't get that opportunity or don't take that opportunity because they're so focused on the talent development, the people side, but they really need to understand what's going on in the business, get to know those business leaders as much as possible as well. Well, Ash, this has been fantastic. Another phenomenal conversation. Always enjoy talking with you. So thank you again for coming on, and I look forward to talking with you more soon.
All right. Thanks so much, Andy.